Welcome, everybody. I think it's really important that we do this. You know, I taught history for 35 years at Biddeford High School, and naturally I'm a lover of history. And if you put it in the context of today, when you look at the downtown and the mills and how they've changed, it's nice to look at it in terms of that change, but I think it's also important to look at the city and the community in terms of how we got to be who we are. And there's an old saying, a psychology saying or a philosophy saying, the whole is worth more than the sum of the parts. And I like to think of that as looking at the community as a jigsaw puzzle of past and present, where people did certain things that contributed to the community that made the community, in some cases, better, but of course in some cases worse. But I think that we all are today a product of people who have been here and people who are active today making changes. I mean, if you look at your own personal lives, for example, you probably aren't the person today that you were, let's say, 20 years ago because of the experiences that you had. And I think communities go through that cycle too. So as Dennis was saying, this is a great honor for those individuals who are being recognized today and being inducted today as part of the greatest residents in the community, people who gave something of themselves to make it better in their own form and fashion based on their skills. So saying that, let me just read the first plaque. And pardon me if I stumbled. One of the things with the mass is your glasses fog up. I swear, every time I do this, last year when I did this at Kermesse, we had the parade and the driver took me in the wrong direction and I almost missed the whole event. And here now today I'm fogging. But anyway, the first one is Dragitas brothers, Jimmy, Archie, Charlie, Alex, businessmen, civic and community leaders. The sons of Greek immigrants to Biddeford in the early 20th century, they and two other brothers and two sisters first lived at 5 Foss Street. Their father, Spiros, was a shoe cobbler who operated a shoe shine shoe repair shop at 115 Main Street. Having to vacate that property in 1921, their father purchased the property of two businesses at 12 and 14 Washington Street, where he operated his shoe repair business while the family of 10 lived above the business. The Dragitas brothers attended the Biddeford public schools and worked at their father's shoe repair business after school, as well as the shoe store that the family operated in Old Orchard Beach in the summer months. Prohibition ended in 1933. Their mother, Georgia Dragitas, died in 1935 at the age of 60 in Hebron, Maine, where she was being treated for tuberculosis. In the middle of the Great Depression, with their father in failing health, not wanting to continue in the shoe repair business and concerned about the health conditions working at the foundry, Archie and Charlie, with the assistance of other members of the family, converted their father's business into a small tavern, initially called Charles Cafe, where they served sandwiches and beer to mill workers and other patrons. After Archie purchased a 35-foot mahogany bar at an auction in Boston, the restaurant, at Brother Ted's suggestion, became known as the Wonder Bar Restaurant. After World War II, Jimmy, Archie, Charlie, and Alex became business partners. Jimmy managed the cash register and scheduled the staffing. Archie tended the bar and closed at the end of the day. Charlie was the purchasing agent and managed banquets and catering, while Alex helped everywhere, opening in the morning and making breakfast. With a tagline, "From a sandwich to a banquet," the restaurant became the Wonder Bar Steakhouse, a premier restaurant in southern Maine. The Wonder Bar soon became the hub for Biddeford politics. Tom Welch reported in the Portland Press-Herald in an article entitled, "Wonder Bar, it's a place to go for lamb in politics." Quote, "To the working people of this mill city, the Wonder Bar restaurant is the place to go to meet friends and have good meal for a reasonable price. But to people who are running for public office, it is the place where they can order baked lamb and get a side order of political insight for free." Besides running the restaurant, the Dragitas brothers were very active in the Greek community and Biddeford as a whole. Sid Levitt, columnist for the Portland Press-Herald, wrote in an article at the Wonder Bar closing, quote, "What made the Wonder Bar unique was the family that created it, the 4 Dragitas brothers. Jimmy Dragitas, the boss and patriarch, stood like a monument at the cash register, polite and charming, but unquestionably in control. Archie, second in command, Standing beside the bar with a never-ending stream of conversation and a never-exhausted imagination for nicknaming his patrons, Charlie, the laconic one, telling relaxed stories of other places and times. Alex, the youngest, doing nearly everything that had to be done in that place, including making the best blue cheese dressing in the region. The Wonder Bar was a special place because the Dragidis brothers are a special family. They made their customers feel special. I welcome the family of the Dragidises.
Thank you very much, Alan. On behalf of my family, I want to express our appreciation to the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center, I keep stumbling over that, for this tremendous honor. I know my family is very pleased, but most of all, I know my father and his three brothers would be particularly happy because they loved the city of Biddeford and they devoted a lot of their time and effort and were very hard workers and made a very successful business. And as my Uncle Jimmy was quoted as saying when the Wonder Bar was going to be sold in the early 80s, when asked about the success of the business, he said, because Biddeford was a kind-hearted city to a immigrant family 70 years ago. And once again, I just want to thank everybody, and we appreciate receiving this honor. Thank you.
Hang that right up there. It's interesting to note, as Spiros was talking, I went to high school with Spiros, and I knew Donna actually too, for a couple of years behind, but the importance of the immigrants that came to Biddeford, we're an extremely diverse city today, but we always have been. So whether it was the Greek population or the Jewish population, or the Franco population, the Irish population, they all worked in those mills. It was a huge melting pot, even though the ethnicity was always there. There were waves and waves that came that did particular jobs. And again, as I mentioned earlier, all those dynamics made Biddeford what it is today, and that's important to think about. The next one is Louis B. Papalosier, November 17th, 1879 to January 14th, 1962. Mayor, businessman, devoted politician. Louis Losier was born in Biddeford in 1879 to Canadian-born parents. He received his elementary education in Biddeford parochial schools and graduated from St. Anne's College in Quebec. He returned to Biddeford to study law with Judge George F. Haley, Chief Justice of the Maine Supreme Court, and passed the bar exam in 1906. Early in his career, he served as the attorney for Pepple Trust Company and then served on the board of directors. Although he was a lawyer, banker, and businessman, his true love was politics. He served in the state legislature, representing Biddeford, and locally 3 years as city alderman, 1 term as the city auditor, and 1 term as the city solicitor. In 1947, he captured the Democratic nomination for governor, one of the first Franco-Americans to run for statewide office in Maine. Politically, however, he was best known for serving 15 consecutive terms as mayor of Biddeford from 1941 to 1955 inclusively. He was proud of having the lowest tax rate in the state and was one of the vanishing breed of old-time politicians. But throughout his long career in politics, Losier was a controversial figure, loved by many and feared by others. He strongly held ideas of government were not always along the orthodox lines, but the people of Biddeford endorsed them again and again while even token opposition to his re-election as mayor was infrequent. It was written that Lozier ruled with paternalistic benevolence. Michael Ginnard, who nominated Lozier, reflects in Lozier's refusal to endorse a statewide rule prohibiting the speaking of the French language in public schools other than in French language classes, even on the playgrounds before and after school. For the Franco-American students attending public schools in Biddeford, that paternalism meant that they could speak their mother tongue in the schoolyard, and the hundreds of parochial school kids in the city could ride to the school on a city bus for free, despite the doctrine of separation of church and state. As the Biddeford Daily Journal wrote, Lozier knew his people. Papa Lozier. I had a friend of mine named Con Carvanides, and there was a story about Papa that was, God put the snow there, let God take it away. It was in reference to a big storm. And Con and I were talking about that, and Con said, I was that guy. I'm going, what are you talking about? He said, when I was younger, I was a kid reporter for the Portland Press-Herald. It was a big storm, and my editor demanded that I get in touch with the mayor of Biddeford to talk about what was going to happen. And so he said, I called Papa, and I either woke him up or something, but anyway, he said that quote, God put the snow there, let him take it away, and I published it. Papa never talked to him again. The next inductee is Israel Chevenel, April 27th, 1826 to August 22nd, 1912. Pioneer, builder, Franco-American. On April 1st, 1845, Israel Chevenel left his home in Compton in the Eastern Townships region of Canada, now known as Quebec, and walked nearly 200 miles to Biddeford. He was 19 and looking for work, and when he arrived, he said it was the busiest place he had ever seen. Chevenel is known as Biddeford's first permanent French-Canadian settler and the first French voter, casting his vote for Abraham Lincoln in 1860. He was a builder. For nearly 20 years, he worked as a brickmaker before he went into business for himself, owning and operating a gravel pit. Chevenel built homes that still stand today, and he helped organize and build St. Joseph's Church on Elm Street. He built a family with his wife, Marie-Louise, and was a neighbor to his parents and younger brother's family and other friends and relatives in town. He was a leader. In addition to his business pursuits, he was heavily involved with the French-Canadian community, its associations, and St. Joseph's Parish, and he held various city positions over the years, including overseer of the poor. In 1905, Chevenel marched in the parade celebrating Biddeford's 50th anniversary as a city, proudly carrying a banner reading, I was here in '55. He was a leader within his family and social circles, providing support and work, as well as setting an example for industriousness and honesty. He was a pioneer and an inspiration. The story of Chevenel's journey from Canada and how he inspired family and friends to join him in making Biddeford home set the foundation for his long life and lasting legacy. When he died in 1912 at the age of 86, he was remembered for his qualities: hardworking, tenacious, resilient, public-spirited, faithful, intelligent, and stubborn, and for how he put those qualities into practice every day to improve his own life and the community around him. Israel Chevenel. Would you like to say anything? Either one of you?
Hello, my name is Tanya Chevenel, and this is my father, Ray Chevenel. And this is our cousin of a cousin of a cousin, Chevenel, John Chevenel, who came from Dover, New Hampshire today. Israel Chevenel is my third great-grandfather. I rode down from Bangor today, and on the way I was thinking of two words, the word legend and the word legacy. And I never really thought about how those two were so close together. But it was the legend of Israel Chavanel walking all the way from Canada to Biddeford. It's a very big part of his legacy because that story was told down through all his descendants. But when I started working on a documentary film about 6 years ago, I spent a lot of time in Biddeford, and that's how I learned a lot more about his legacy. And that was made possible by the people that have lived here for the last couple of hundred years, who have maintained buildings that his bricks are in, and have maintained traditions, and have cared. And what I love about Biddeford is that the past and the present roam here together really comfortably, and that'll help make a great future. So thank you so much for this, and thank you, Mayor Allen, and thank you for the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. We appreciate it very much.
I'm Ray Chavanel. I'd just like to add a couple of things. In 1958, I was at Cheverus High School in Portland. I was born in Portland and went to school there. And the big deal for Cheverus students at the times of proms was to come down to the Wonder Bar restaurant. And I mean, you were a big deal even in Portland, Maine. The other thing is, in 2015, I retraced my great-great-grandfather's walk from Compton, Quebec to Biddeford. And one of the things that Alan has just reminded us of, he brought the values from southern Quebec with him. And when Tanya and I were visiting leading up to my trek, that's what we saw up there. Industriousness, people caring about their properties, their buildings, their homes, the community spirit, taking care of each other. And when today it's still happening, and that's one of the contributions from Israel Chavanel here in Biddeford. Thank you.
If you haven't seen the movie that Tanya made of her father's walk, duplicating that feat, check it out. It's amazing. It's just a fascinating story, but to see you be able to do that, just thrilling. So. Next is Benjamin Stern, July 14th, 1885 to December 16th, 1975, compassionate, courageous advocate. Born in Kovel, Lithuania on July 14th, 1885 as Benjamin Chelner, he adopted his mother's maiden name in 1900 when pursued by Russian authorities as a Jew and a radical, he fled to London, home of his maternal uncle, who was the father of writer Gladys Bertha Stern. He stayed for several months, learned a few English phrases, and was introduced to the ways of the West. Sensing that America held great promise, he left London. Upon arrival in Boston, he started peddling linoleum from a wagon, then labored in the window cleaning and building maintenance business, continuing in that line of employment in Lawrence, Massachusetts. He met Rose Wolftraub, daughter of a rabbi from Odessa, Russia, and they were married in 1909. By 1920, he had gained enough confidence to go his own way in business, and Ben and Rose moved to Biddeford, Maine. He felt that the humming mill town on the banks of the Saco River offered fertile ground for his startup property maintenance company. During the 1920s, America rode a wave of prosperity, stoked in a large part by legions of people who toiled in misery. Children as young as 10 tended to factory lines. Men and women labored up to 80 hours a week under appalling conditions. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the United States entered the greatest economic depression in history. The Great Depression exposed the social inequities of our society. People who had worked hard all of their lives were cast aside, penniless, into old age. Many were secreted away in nightmarish poorhouses known as almhouses. This was unacceptable to Ben Stern. He ran for the Maine State House of Representatives. At that time, Biddeford was predominantly French-Canadian. He earned the backing of the town's Catholic priests because they appreciated his advocacy of pensions for the elderly, restrictions on child labor, and limits on maximum work days. Ben won the election as an independent at age 45. After winning another term, Stern fought long and hard for the passage of the old age pension bill, which was finally signed into law on March 31st, 1933. The child labor, working hour, and working rights and safety initiatives he so passionately supported became law under Roosevelt's New Deal. Ben Stern returned to Biddeford to concentrate on his family and business, but he will always be remembered for his courage, independence, and integrity as he consistently worked to advance the causes of the working man. Benjamin Stern.
Yeah, I do have a few comments I'd like to make. I've never done one of these talks with a mask on before, so we'll see how this goes. I wanted to, first of all, say on the behalf of the entire Stern family, I want to thank you for this honor. I know it would have meant the world to my grandfather, Benjamin Stern. As you just heard, he loved Biddeford and its people, having represented the town for 2 terms in the state legislature in the 1930s. One of the very first Jews in that body, and also serving on a wide variety of local boards and committees here in town. It's all pretty remarkable for a refugee who fled persecution in his native Lithuania and landed on these shores at the ripe old age of 15. After learning English and the ways of American business in the Boston area, he moved up to Biddeford, where he founded and ran the Biddeford and Saco Window Cleaning Company for 35 years. Ben Stern's other great passion, besides serving the community, was fishing. I could talk all day about the endless fishing stories, but don't worry, I won't. I'm just going to relate 2 of them. There was a time that he caught 67 white perch in an hour. He was landing them so fast that he ran out of bait, the trusty worms that he so treasured, which he pronounced worms in his thick, old world accent. He was on a roll that day and he didn't want to quit. But what to do? Well, he resorted to baiting his line with the popcorn that he had brought along for lunch. And it worked too. He continued catching fish. So at a farewell party in 1955 that city bigwigs gave him before he moved to Pennsylvania to be with his ailing wife, who at that time was in the care of family down there, he was presented with a big bag of popcorn to honor this display of fishing perseverance. One more story. My cousin relates the time that she was 6 or 7. They were out fishing on a fishing trip in the countryside around Biddeford. With great effort, she landed a wicked huge pickerel on the shore. It was probably nearly as big as she was at that time, and in fact, it almost dragged her into the river. If not for my father rushing to her aid, she probably would have gone for a swim. Anyway, the next day, Ben Stern was so proud of that catch that he paraded the fish all over town to show everybody his granddaughter's ginormous catch. And I can just picture him going storefront to storefront with this big old slimy and smelly fish in hand, which was probably getting stinkier and more bedraggled as the day progressed, to proudly trumpet his granddaughter's achievement. The farewell party in 1955 that I previously mentioned took place at the Wonder Bar, or as her grandfather called it, the Wunder Bar. And we see already that several of my grandfather's fellow inductees into the Biddeford Hall of Fame today were brothers who ran the Wonder Bar for many years. As we've heard back then, the restaurant served as a hub that in so many ways tied the community together. But it's funny, if you think about it, that even now, all these years later, the Wonder Bar still weaves together the disparate lives that are being honored at today's induction ceremony. Mention was made at that farewell party of our grandfather's adherence to the precepts of service found in the Hebrew Talmud. He wasn't really a particularly religious man, but I think his record of service to the Biddeford community can be an example to all of us, no matter what our faith tradition, of selfless devotion. He was a proud member of Biddeford's small Jewish community, which did so much for so many. Ben Stern, as we've heard, had a strong moral compass, which was reflected in his legislative initiatives to provide pensions for the destitute elderly, protect workers' rights, and support child labor laws. So really, it's no wonder that the people of Biddeford loved him, and the feeling was mutual. So thank you again for this honor. We, his grandchildren, and now the next generation of Sterns, are so proud that he is being honored and remembered in this way. Thanks. Here's where we see what a klutz I am. I'll try to hang this thing. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Again, looking back and thinking about the mills today and how everybody talks about the apartments and the art galleries and whatever it happens to be, it's interesting to note that if you go back 100 years, there were kids working in those mills. You know, if you read Michael Ginnard's book, it talks about that and how they used to have little boxes to stand on. And I know with the French-Canadian population, there was a lack of education because kids all went to work in the mills. And somebody stood up and said that was wrong. And again, that's the power of an individual to elicit change. So. And the last inductee is George Thatcher, April 12, 1754 to April 6, 1824. Judge, pioneer, and congressman. Born in Yarmouth, Massachusetts, George Thatcher was the youngest in the family of 11 children. He graduated from Harvard College in 1776, studied law, and over to practice in York, Maine. In 1874, he married Sarah Savage and lived on South Street in Biddeford, where they raised a family of 5 daughters and 5 sons. He changed the spelling of his name to Thacher in 1815 at the age of 61. He was elected to the first United States Congress in 1789, a representative of the District of Maine, which was then part of Massachusetts. And he witnessed the inauguration of George Washington as the first president of the United States. Before he resigned in 1801, he had been elected from a far corner of the Union to a seat in the United States House of Representatives for 12 years in a row, more than any other legislator in the history of Congress up at that time. Thatcher accepted an appointment to a Massachusetts state court in 1792 and served until 1800 when he was appointed to the state's Supreme Judicial Court. During the organization of Maine statehood in 1819, he was a member of the convention that created the new state's constitution. He resigned from the court in 1824 and moved back to Biddeford. Thatcher and other citizens cherished their right to worship by their values and beliefs. Consequently, they left the First Parish Congregational Church on the Pool Road and started the Second Congregational Church on Crescent Street in Biddeford in 1797. They were the early Unitarians in the community, and they led the way for the proliferation of other Protestant denominations throughout the community. As an ardent Unitarian, Thatcher helped to sponsor the creation of Bowdoin College so that Maine would have its own institution of higher education, and he donated a large collection of books to its library. He also made a more modest single-volume donation to Freiburg Academy. In recognition of the accomplishments of Judge George Thatcher, the Biddeford House was renamed the Thatcher Hotel in 1894. It's quite a story. So this year's class of inductees is an impressive group. And when you look at the range of things that they accomplished, I think it makes me feel proud, and I'm sure you feel proud too, to be connected to Biddeford, because they made their little part of the world a better place because of their talent, their skill, their family values, or whatever it happened to be. So it's really important that they get recognized. I would like to recognize Diane Sear at this point. I guess she had a few words she'd like to say.
I want to thank every single one of you for coming and for the contributions of your families, first of all. I also want to thank Dennis L'Italien, who is the chair of the Hall of Fame committee, and the whole Hall of Fame committee, the selection committee for the choices they made. I don't think that we could have made any better choices could have been made. They did a great job. Thank you. I do have a little something for you. I have, because of this year of COVID, and we had to do things very differently this year. And fortunately, I want to thank the city and the mayor also for allowing us to use the chambers where the actual Hall of Fame hangs. But because of that, we couldn't do the reception that we usually do following the ceremony. So we have a little something for each of you in hopes that you might enjoy our city, maybe take a walk down Main Street, have something to eat or drink, and get together with your family without a mask if you can. And maybe pick up a brochure, take a walk and see some of our museum in the streets. The brochures are on the table. And so while you do that, we're hoping that when you come out, the banners, which you see hanging here, will be hanging on the street for you, because that's what we're going to do next. Also, if you can hang around a little bit after we do the pictures, it would be nice to get some pictures of the different families with the plaques outside without your masks on, if you're agreeable to that. So I think that's it. I have some, yeah, we have 5 souvenir booklets for you each, but we're going to put some on the table. You're all here today. Take what you want. You can take more than 5 if you need it. So that's it. Thank you, everyone.